succeed didn't come with a title. It didn't come with a, you must get these grades or, this achievement. It was just do your best. You were constantly reminded to go and do your best.
And then suddenly either we're faced with different stakeholders where it's slightly nuanced, or we've got a challenging situation where we need a different kind of approach that we've been taking to. What was the moment for you when you knew that what had got you here, if you like, wasn't necessarily going to get you?
I'm a very driven individual. I'm a very task-orientated individual. I'm very outcome-focused, and I believe, rightly or wrongly, that anything can be achieved. You just got to work out what the solution is, and the solution will be different every single time. Absolutely, every single one of them is kooky and quirky or different in their own way.
Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that James O'Sullivan has joined me in the studio today. Welcome, James.
Thank you very much, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing your story today. But before we do that, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience, just say a little bit about who you are and where your current focus is.
Sure. There's an opening question. So James, who is he? He is a 51-year-old who leads a boutique management consultancy. But I guess more than that, there's James the personality. There's James the driven individual who's very focused on what he wants and what he would like to achieve. And it's that really kind of bleeds into work and kind of what I've ended up doing. I haven't taken a normal career path through life. I've created a little bit of a stepping stone one myself along the way, which I think has worked for me. And that's the key thing for me, is that you do what's right for you. And I guess I've kind of created a world where I go out and help others. I help other organizations, and my company helps other organizations to get better at what they do. And in effect, we're looking to kind of bring the two together. We bring all the personalities from all the people, including mine, out to play. I'd like to think that I am a very straight talking individual, a red personality by trait, but that comes obviously with some downsides. My filter is not always as good as it should be, and therefore sometimes maybe I say what I shouldn't say. But I guess that's all influenced by that path I took, how I've come to be where I am, and then how I make that work for me.
Excellent. And even though I know you're 51 and you obviously put everything into your work in terms of service of others, what about when you're not working? What is it that you do to recharge the batteries when you're not actually working?
These days, it is all about the children. 2 young boys, 11 and 8, who, like every other parent, is the local taxi firm who is running them to all of the clubs that they want to go to and be involved in. Work is a bit all-encompassing, long hours, a little bit of travel, quite a bit of travel, and therefore trying to blend the two is as challenging as it is for everyone else. A lovely wife who gave up her career in the pharmaceutical industry to kind of look after the kids, look after the house, because the two of us couldn't do sizable jobs at the same time. So we try and make that work as best we can in this lovely modern world where everything seems to happen instantly and where everybody wants to do everything right now.
Super. And I've got a boy as well. So what is it the boys love to do in terms of spending time with you when they do get time with you? What is it they love to do with you personally?
Well, see, they're two very, very different boys, as is often the case, isn't it? Kids are not mirror images. So we have one who's very straight, very calm, more academic, therefore loves to kind of get into the detail. At the moment, he's got a real kind of fascination getting into cars. So, he's watched, I think, every single YouTube clip going around cars, and he knows more facts than I would ever care to know and he's become really fixated with it in a nice way. And that's good. So that's his kind of release is kind of like, let's talk about that, knowing that I know a fair bit about it. And on the other side, my 8-year-old is, I guess, a little bit more of a mirror of me in that he loves his sport. He loves his rugby. He loves his judo. It's all about, come on, let's go out in the garden. Let's take a little rugby ball. Let's throw it, kick it, whatever else it might be. If you're going out into the woods or the forest near us, he wants to come along and he wants to just be out there in nature. He wants to go for a little run. He wants to challenge himself to get to the top of a hill. So he's very physical. The other one is a bit more mental. So it's a good mix. It's a lovely mix, to be fair, and it keeps us all entertained, doesn't it? You know, you do sit there and wonder where they'll go in their life, their world. This modern age is very different to the one we grew up in, but then I guess ours was very different to the one our parents grew up in.
Sure. And that links us nicely to the next part of the interview in that sense. So you've already said you've got this red, tinge to the way you are as a leader. And for those that aren't familiar out there in terms of insights or DISC, whichever one you use, red is very much that kind of, dominant type of behavior where I'm front and foremost, and, I really take the lead on these things. Yeah. But sometimes you said the blinkers are on, and maybe we sometimes make decisions that we haven't necessarily considered a lot of the time. So that will come in, I think, in terms of thing. But let's go back to your childhood and obviously, your parents. So what was it about your, early years, do you think, looking back on them, that shaped that kind of early leadership style that you adopted in your 20s and 30s?
I think it's quite straightforward now that you look back on it as a 50-something-year-old. Probably less so when you're younger. My parents both arrived from Ireland in the early 60s, as did half the country, I think, at that point in time, all building an Irish community in London. They met somewhere along the way, and by the time we get to 1973, along I come as the firstborn son, aptly named James. My dad is Jim, also James. His dad, James. His dad, James. You get the theory. But the thing that, looking back, is very stark is the fact that what you learn as a plastic paddy, as a first-generation Irish boy born in the UK, is the work ethic. So clearly as a community, they came over with not a lot from a very kind of poor start. And what they all want, and what my parents wanted, was that we got a better, run at life than they considered they'd had. They wanted to give us all the opportunities that they possibly could do, but that they could afford, because they didn't have that money. They didn't have jobs that paid huge amounts. But the one thing you can never fault them for is that they would do absolutely everything they could do to get you what you needed. And therefore the work ethic was really, really high. And therefore you were taught from a very young age that you don't get anything for free. You have to earn it. Now, whether that's washing the car, whether that's mowing the lawn, whether that's going out and getting a Saturday job at 13 back in those days, it doesn't really matter. It's all about furthering yourself. So I watched my dad go and do evening courses that would help further his career. I watched in the 80 to 82 recession, when work in the UK dried up, he jumped on a plane to Saudi. So, for those 2 years, we got used to what was good at the time. He came home every 3 months for 3 weeks, and he brought the most amazing presents. My mum was adorned with loads and loads of 24 karat gold. As kids, we got all the latest toys because, they were on that side of the world long before they were here. So I remember getting the first Walkman at school. But I guess that set you up again, where my mum was therefore running a house, a home, 3 kids under the age of 8, all on her own. But she did it with her eyes shut. She just set everything up as a task. And it was just like, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. And so my whole childhood was watching them, in a nice way, challenge you, push you. They moved house to put you into the right schools. They gave us tutoring to get us into the local grammar schools. Very few counties left with grammar schools, but we were in one of them. And they really, really wanted to see you succeed. But succeed didn't come with a title. It didn't come with a, you must get these grades or, this achievement. It was just do your best. You were constantly reminded to go and do your best. And if you did your best, and if you left everything out there, whether it was in academia or sport or friendships, they were happy. Then you've done all you can do. And I guess then it went to the next stage, which was just don't listen to people telling you what you could, would, should do. Create your own path. You can move around. You can get what you like if you're willing to go out there and show people. And I guess as you grow up, that's where you start to see that leadership side coming in, which is leaders aren't born with a certificate that says you are a leader. It's natural. Now, I guess I had the situation where I was not the greatest academic. Of that, I can be sure. I would show you my school grades, but it would be embarrassing. But I was quite good at sport. And therefore, I kind of worked out that I could learn more playing sport than I could in a classroom. So on one side of a conversation, you'd have a teacher telling you that you'd amount to nothing because you weren't paying enough attention. And on another side of the same school, you had a teacher going, if you could just train and do this, if you could just twist that and do that, you'll succeed. And so you had this juxtaposed position running in the same environment. And I guess those kind of experiences up until your early 20s, subconsciously just framed what I then did when I went out to work. I knew I could go and get whatever I wanted. I knew I didn't have the grades. I wasn't going to be one of those kids on the milk round and, just walking into a big city job. But I was the guy that wrote to every firm in the FTSE 100 and just said, this is me, this is what I do, would be interested to have a chat. Now, let's be clear, that didn't amount to anything, but at least I did it. But it meant that I kind of very early on realised about taking that underlying red kind of tonology and turning it to my advantage. So if you want something, go and get it. If you want to go and get a job in a FTSE 100 company, then work out who they are, work out all the angles, find one where you think a lot of people won't go for that angle and try and do it. When you get into it, decide whether that works for you or not. If not, then look and see which parts of it you like, which parts you don't, and take it and go on the next stage. So as I said, my career path is a little bit zigzag and zag-zig, but ultimately we all get to the same outcome. And who determines what success is, who determines what's good or bad or right or wrong? Who knows? There's no book, is there? Let's be honest. So I was always happy. I then took that into a world where I kind of became a bit of a natural leader, self-appointed. People like that. People above you in hierarchies like that. They want people who are willing to take things on. It doesn't mean you've always got to get it right, because believe me, I'll be the first to admit I've got plenty wrong in my career. It's how you own those mistakes. It's how you own those things that go wrong. It's how you put them right that they're more interested in. Because again, I think if people can see good behaviours, if they can see people putting in the effort, that work, ethic coming back into play, if they can see people who are willing to go and talk to others and be that front-facing person, customer-facing person, then you kind of get rewarded for it.
Let's talk about the zigzagging a little bit. So what I found with other guests on the show is, whatever has shaped their leadership style from their childhood, a lot of its environment, as is with you and family, it works for a long time. And then suddenly either we're faced with different stakeholders where it's slightly nuanced, or we've got a challenging situation where we need a different kind of approach that we've been taking to. What was the moment for you when you knew that what had got you here, if you like, wasn't necessarily going to get you there in terms of being the same kind of leader?
I'd take it slightly sideways. I worked out that there are certain characters and personality types that I instantly gel with, and there are certain ones that I instantly jar with, and then you've got everything in between. And so I guess I learnt predominantly through that kind of mid-20s to mid-30s window that I learnt when to let go, I learnt when to step away, I learnt when to say you're better off having this conversation with someone else. So it wasn't so much a case of it was stopping me. I just learnt to play the system, play the game a little bit differently. And I think in doing that probably helped accelerate things. Because again, I think, it's kind of respected from the other side. I work in a service world. I've always worked in a service world where, the customer is in ascendancy. And therefore it's incumbent on me to take myself out of situations. It's incumbent on me to push things equally where I think they need pushing because the customer isn't convinced enough or brave enough to kind of take it to the next level. But at the same time, to your point, you've also got to know when to bite your tongue. You've got to know and understand your own strengths, but more importantly, your own weaknesses. So as I've got older, there are things that I could probably look back on that I said when I was younger, and you kind of wince a bit and go, oof, that must have come across rather harshly. There's times now where I'll say nothing, and others will be saying, why didn't you say something? And it's just like, I don't know, I've learned to keep my mouth shut, and whether it will have the right outcome or not. I think if you then turn it back into the inner kind of leadership or leading big programs or transformations or even my own company, there's a little bit of knowing the other people, isn't there? There are people like me who do need a bit of a kick up the bum every now and again, who need a bit of cajoling. There are others who, you know, that if you do that, it will have a detrimental impact onto them. It's not to say it's right or wrong, it's just detrimental to them. And therefore you've got to work that out rather fast and then course correct. But I think where you kind of came from, that's an age thing, isn't it? That's experience. It's a bit weird because I sit here as a 51-year-old, and it was only when I turned 51, ironically, that I kind of think, oh, I'm closer to the end of my working career than I am the beginning. And it's the first time I'd thought about that. And it's weird because I don't feel like my dad, if that makes sense. As a kid, you were looking at your dad at, you know, I'd probably left home by the time he was 50, I guess. But I would have looked at him and gone, oh, you know, you're looking like a dad. You're looking like you're heading towards the back end of your career. And I'm sat there kind of going, oh, I've got lots more to give. I'm really energized. I really want to keep going. And you're kind of wondering what everyone else is thinking. What are the 20-year-olds around the office, you know, in my customer sites look at me now and go, he looks like he needs to step away. So it's how through time you blend it all, isn't it? And you learn to probably give more advice and guidance, you know, the further you go into your career, rather than instructional, as you probably did back in your 20s or 30s. I think sometimes those sheep dipping courses that we all were put through, they're not necessarily a good thing, because it's a bit like academia. It's kind of like, it's a playbook that says this is the only way you can do it and you have to follow these 10 steps. And I still cringe to this day when I hear people come out with the phraseology that I know came from those sheep dipping courses. And it just makes me twist my neck and go, oh, you don't need to do that. Just be you, be yourself, be a human. People will buy into that.
It's really interesting what you said there. And I've spoken to a lot of people who are in their early 50s. And I think this is a good term from Ireland, actually, in terms of Sniper's Alley. I'm 55 now, and we've got this period which you're in now and I'm in, where actually if we don't look after our own well-being, then we might be picked off, so to speak. So, you know, from your perspective, bear in mind you grew up in that kind of environment where it was a hard work ethic for the right reasons, and you've already alluded to the fact that you work very hard. You know, what are you aware of now compared to a few years ago about having to look after your own well-being to make sure that you can make sure that you extend your I will be honest and say I find it really, really hard. Right. So unfortunately, Sniper's Alley is real for me, because I have been to, I think it's 4 funerals in the last 2 years of friends, colleagues, all of which either didn't make it to 50 or only just made it to 50. And it really brings it home, because as you said, we all think we're invincible. We all think that it happens to someone else. We all think that it's for the older generation. But as you rightly point out, I am now one of that generation. But I do find it hard. As someone who spent until his probably nearly 40th birthday doing a lot of sport, exercise, you know, whether it was rugby, whether it was swimming, whether it was marathons, triathlons, adventure racing, doesn't matter what, I tried most things at some point in time. At the point where we kind of settled down late in life, had the kids late in life, it's all been the focus on the kids, and work's obviously come up on the other side to be even more all-encompassing. I am therefore going to put my hand up and go, I'm terrible. I don't do any exercise at all. The one thing I have changed to try and counter it is diet. So I guess we'll come back to it in a bit. I'm a bit of a YouTube freak. I like shorts. I'm one of that kind of ilk. And therefore I've watched a lot of talk around increasing protein, lowering carbs once you're past 50. And that certainly has worked immensely well for me. And that was a very clear decision to do that. And I guess like a lot of people, I probably thought nothing of it beforehand and thought it was just, you know, the latest fad. But in reality, in terms of giving you better energy, in terms of making you feel better in yourself, in terms of how you can carry yourself, it's made a massive difference to my life. I still work long hours. I still don't sleep enough. I still don't do exercise. It would be lovely to think of being able to go and do the others, but that's just not where I am, and that's maybe not the kind of person I am at the moment. I've got a long list, by the way, of things I want to
to go back and do later in life. So an ex-climbing friend of mine sent me a little WhatsApp the other day from the other side of the world, and he just said, 2026, 2027, do you fancy, going for K2? And I just laughed. And just went, oh my God, now we're going back, more than 15 years to a very, very different world. But it immediately just kicked in. And I was already building a kit list in my head, within 5 minutes. I was then winding it backwards because I scenario plan everything. I just run hundreds of them at a time. And I was sat there going, right, okay, so we've got to warm into that. So, maybe next summer I grab another friend and do we go and do, let's go around the base of Mont Blanc. Let's do that 7-day kind of trip and let's just start reintroducing ourselves to foothills and stuff like that. But it's how you balance the world, isn't it? And in a way that works for you. I can't come home and say to Amanda, I'm off out for a 10K run. That would just be totally unfair. So I just do it my way.
Let's link that in then to, again, the red. Okay, so somebody at your stage of life now in your career, and you say you're closer to the end than you were at the start. What I find with a lot of leaders is this challenge about knowing when to start to let go. You've talked a little bit about that in terms of personality types. But actually, generally, if you're really red in terms of colour, that control piece that drives us and our ability to remain in control or perceived in control, sometimes in the future needs to dissipate a little bit to enable others to, I guess, fill that space. So what thoughts do you have on that about how easy that's going to be?
I don't know if I'd use the phrase easy. I am everything you just described. I'm a very driven individual. I'm a very task-orientated individual. I'm very outcome focused, and I believe, rightly or wrongly, that anything can be achieved. You just got to work out what the solution is, and the solution will be different every single time. But to steal someone else's phrase and logo, nothing is impossible. Our whole business is predicated upon the fact that I've got 80 individuals, all of which have got 20 years experience. Therefore, they've been in a lot of big, hairy, ugly transformation programs. And therefore, they know the way to the fire escape quicker when things go wrong. They know how to put things right. They know how to put out the fires, which, a 30-year-old just wouldn't know because they haven't been there. No fault of their own. They just haven't been there. And therefore, I guess there's notionally 100 of me inside the company. Now, in saying that, there are the alphas, there are the church mice, there are the desk bangers, there are the collaborators, there are the tech people, there are the business change people. And so I guess we learn to coexist and collaborate more maybe as we grow older. It's interesting when people come into the firm, they all come generally from the big four or big industry, and they'll come in where they were the North Star somewhere else. And they'll arrive, and for that first 6 months whilst they're settling in, and you have to let them settle in, they'll be like, you need to do this, you need to do this, why aren't you doing this, why aren't you doing that? And then within 6 months they'll go, oh, I'm not the only North Star, there's 100 North Stars. And then they go, oh, isn't that a relief? I can just actually ask, does anybody know this? And the answers just flow. And I suppose at a personal level, I've got to kind of go on that kind of journey. Now, if I look back at me running a big transformation program and being 98% red at the time, it fitted, it worked, it was perfect. Am I 98% red doing what I do today as the CEO of the company? No, I can't be. Therefore, I've brought elements of blue into it. But do they come naturally all the time? No, of course they don't. I've got to think about it. I've got to bring them in. I've got to force them in. I've got to mask a little bit. And I guess I watched my predecessor, who the two of us had worked together in different organizations for 17 years. He was an absolute genius at it because he was as red could be. And by the end, he was as blue could be. He still, in the background, was himself. But he just learned to, as you said, turn the tables a little bit and bring other people into it. Now, like any boutique firm, if you're looking at succession planning, I've got a very careful eye on the next generation. You've got to allow them the room to want to go and do it themselves, to show what they can do. But at the same time, there are times, a bit like a coach in a sporting environment, where you've got to step in and say, okay, now you've gone too far. Now we've got to bring it back. Now we've got to do it differently. You still need the leadership. You still need the direction. You still need the guidance. You still have that casting view or vote that says, okay, you've gone as far as I can let you go. And so it's just part of a learning experience, isn't it? And I've got to learn to switch off more, leave people more to their own devices. But as I said at the start, I personally find that hard. That's just not how I'm wired.
Thank you for that. Let's link into that. I've got kids of varying ages, a bit older than yours, but if you look at those in their 20s now that are coming into organizations, they've got very different expectations. You're of a generation of my generation in terms of leader. What is it you find most challenging right now in terms of getting the most out of that generation that are coming into organizations now?
So this is a topic that has been well discussed. Everywhere I go, everyone asks this now in every company. And I don't know whether that's probably true of every generation. As I say, we are very different to our parents' generation. My dad finished work at a set time every single day. You could time your watch by the time he would walk through that back door every single night. He never did work in the evenings. He didn't work at weekends. He didn't work when we were on holiday. I think we, in a very counter way, grew up in a world where maybe the competition, the hours you were doing was a bit of a badge of honor. And we're now in a generation where it's swung the other way. Rightly, wrongly, I don't know. It's a very different way of working, isn't it? We were the generation that went to a physical office block or a place of work. And again, that's not the case today. Now, how that's impacted or where that's impacted from is not in the last 3 or 4 years since COVID. It would have started, a decade maybe before that. I think the interesting part from a leadership question, I was stood talking to a senior exec on an open plan floor recently, and the conversation went to the question of, when you look out across the floor of X hundred people, how many future leaders do you see? And the answer was not very many. But then it went to, if that were 20 years ago, how many do you think you would have seen? And we were debating whether it is any different, or whether there really were only ever 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on every floor. And it's just that, everyone, given you were their peers at the time, everyone knew who they were. And so, you just locked in behind them and you let them go. And maybe we're just looking now down onto the floor and kind of saying, who are they? But at the same time, the work ethic question, I don't know. It feels very different to me. But as I said, I'm coming at it from one extreme end. I know with my boys, they're not growing up in the way I grew up. Their expectations are, it's tap and go with my card and I get it. Or I just got to, complain enough that I get it. And they're a little bit more spoiled than we were. But then, as parents, you're still doing the same, aren't you? You want them to have a better life than you had. I certainly do. I'm sat there kind of going, I hope you get better school grades than I did, because as much as I've made a path for myself through it, it's been harder than it possibly should have been if I'd actually got the grades. But then at the same time, my younger child is very dyslexic, and therefore I can resonate with everything he's going through. And you can see that I don't mean the word in its heaviest sense, but you can see that the bullying and the name calling hasn't changed in 30, 40 years, right? Someone the other day said that socially to him, yeah, but at the end of the day, you've got no IQ because you're dyslexic. And you're there going, oh, here we go again. And so you're suddenly trying to explain to him, there is absolutely no correlation between those two things. And what he does from a practical point of view is just off the chart, way ahead of other kids of his age, because that's how his brain is wired. And therefore, what I've got to teach him or lead him through, and his mum, is we've just got to find the path that you can follow that gets you what you want. I mean, it's an interesting one in itself, isn't it? If you look now at all of the big personalities, whether that's your Elon Musks, whether that's your Bransons, you could name 100, couldn't you? None of them are normal. Absolutely every single one of them is kooky and quirky or different in their own way. And that's the thing we've got to get across to the whole generation, which is create your own path, be you. And if you're you and you've got a good work ethic, you'll make whatever you want to make out of it. And that's entirely up to you what you want to make out of it.
I love that. Couple of points there that come up for me as you say that. I think it was Branson that said recently he believes that everybody in the world is born some kind of preneur, whether that's an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur. We've all got that in with us, and then it almost gets removed from us as we have our social and economic environments around us. So that was one point. And the second was more and more of my clients that I work with who are CEOs also have this inkling, is ADHD a part of their success? And it wasn't really diagnosable back when they were younger, and they're seeking now diagnosis. And actually, a lot of them are coming back now saying, if I'd only known this 5 or 10 years ago, I could have probably channeled this in a different way, because I do have that superpower. It's interesting, that comes up. So, yeah, thank you for that. And that brings us on to, bear in mind, you're only 51, and, you've still got a few years ahead of you if you make through Sniper's Alley. So what is it you're still yet to achieve, do you think, James? If you look at your future now, what is it you're still yet to achieve in your life?
I don't know. I think I've stopped chasing in the same way. So like everyone else, I started out, as I said, just chasing a job in a FTSE 100 company in central London. It's kind of where I've been for university, and so I kind of knew it well. I then chased, whether it was pay, grades, roles, doesn't matter what, you were chasing something. And I was probably doing that until I was 40-ish. I think making the move across into a boutique firm is very different, because they're flat organisations. Job titles are irrelevant. In effect, pay is equalised. That's kind of irrelevant. I think, success as a business owner, is still gauged by what you do with that business. In our world, or in my world, I equate it to, the brand names that we work for, the people that we're helping, the size and scale of the programs they're asking us to do. I see that as success, because it's all built on a reputation that only we could have built. They're not really looking at balance sheets, P&Ls, profit lines. That's just a byproduct. That, as you said, goes all the way back to school, isn't it? Where you're taught that, you have to have these boxes ticked. And I think therein lies maybe the way that you join the last conversation with this conversation, to Mr. Branson's point. A lot of the very successful businesses that we all now reference are led by people who have got, neurodiversities of one sort or another, whatever flavour they may be. And some of that probably does harp all the way back to childhood. So, yeah, it's not nice having a teacher tell you you'll amount to nothing. But to be fair, I can see his point. When you look at your school grades, do you remember that horrible day when you went to well, it might not be for you. Do you remember when you went to university and the first question everyone asked was, what grades did you get in your A-levels? And you thought the world was going to end when I read mine out. And you just went, sorry about that. But in reality, it's got nothing to do with that. There's a lot of chat, isn't there, about, by the time you're 30-ish, a lot of C grade kids are the ones that the A grade kids are working for, because they've got a chip on their shoulder about something in some way, shape or form, and they're going out of their way to prove people wrong. And I can see that in me. I'm going out to prove people wrong. I want to run a successful multi-million pound, tens of million pound business. I want to work for some of the biggest companies in the world. I want to run their biggest, messiest, ugliest programs, so when you read them out, people go, oh, wow, okay, didn't get that. And that's my equivalent to my A-level results, in effect, in modern day parlance. And so I kind of look at it from a point of view of, it would be nice to hand Project One over at the end of my, time of looking after it, because that's all we ever are, is people who look after these businesses, and hand it on to the next guys in a better way, whatever better may mean. I then do believe in sharing those stories and giving back, if you want to call it that, paying forward, whatever language people want to use. I'm very open and honest in everything I put out on LinkedIn and the little videos that I do. I just kind of tell it as it is. Now, not everyone will agree, not everyone will like it, but there's also, as you said earlier, a lot of people who go, that's really helpful. That's helped me. That's saved me 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, a month of my life, just hearing someone that's been through it or done something before. And so if you touch into that YouTube world, I've used YouTube in the last probably 3 years now, maybe 4, to learn from others, because there are so many people out there with little mini shows about their business. And it can be in completely different industries to the one I'm in. But I still watch it because they're giving away little secrets. They're giving away little learnings. They're taking you on their journey and saying, Jesus, don't do this because it will lead you down this path and it goes down that way. Whereas if you do that, you'll get there quicker. And so you need to pull it all together. But to make that work, people have to be telling the stories, which is why I go back to maybe my role from here on in is just being a storyteller. Now, again, there'll be the haters out there that will just go, he's just another talking head. Okay, I get that. That's your point of view. But at the end of the day, there will also be a group out there who will be going, that's brilliant. That's of use to me, and I can take that and build on it in whatever way, suits their situation, their scenario. So whether that takes me down a world where I get more into, well, ironically, full circle back to advisory, support, NED, call it what you like, being available for people to kind of dip into my brain, then maybe that's kind of the way of going.
Excellent. One final question before I let you go, James. It's just come to me now. And it's mainly linked to who you are and how you developed and what you're doing right now. We've all got these blind spots and none of us are perfect. So for you right now, in terms of where you are, age 51, running that business, living the life that you do, what's the one thing that you would love to change about how you are as a person that would make you feel slightly more fulfilled than you are today?
Oh, that stumped me. I don't know if there is a big ticket item in that box. You know,
Small.
I think there's an element of the conversation we had earlier about being less red and learning to be more blue, learning to bring more people on that journey, because I can't go all the way to the finish line on red. You know, that's just pointless. And if you're going to share stuff, you can't share in red. You've got to share in blue. And so maybe it's that. Maybe it's just learning to tone the volume down, whatever the phrase is, you know, that kind of makes it a bit rounder on the edges rather than square tipped edges. And therefore take more people on that kind of learning experience. But I still stand up for be who you are. Don't do what a textbook tells you to do. Don't follow a rigid methodology, because whilst they'll work for some people, they certainly don't work for everyone. And if you just go out and be you, be authentic, be natural, people will like you. People will do what you want to do. They'll buy from you, if you put it in that sense. They'll work with you, rather than being a cookie cutter that just turns up and says exactly the same as everyone else says. I have far more customers that just go, just thanks for being honest, because no one's had that conversation with us. And I can actually go away and have a think about that and ask a different set of questions based on that knowledge. So maybe it's that.
Super. Well, thank you for being honest with our audience today. Thanks for sharing what
Thank
you
you.
shared. I'm sure that
It's
many of our audience out there, you know, are just taking what they've heard and resonating in some way with them so they can make decisions about their own leadership style, both of how they lead themselves and others. So, James, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much. It's been a fascinating conversation. You could talk about this topic all day long, couldn't you? But it's been a pleasure, and I hope someone finds it useful.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.